Alright, I'm back with another Diablo 4 video. We are one day after the giant patch ahead of the season, and we are one day ahead of the season itself, which launches tomorrow at the time I'm recording this. Needless to say, the giant 1.1 patch has not gone over well with most of the community, if not, almost all of it. A lot of people have seen their favorite builds nerfed to some extent. I kind of want to go into whether this patch is actually as bad as it seems, and it's something that I'm not sure we can really know, 12 hours after it launched for a few reasons, with some exceptions. So the overall takeaway from it is, in 4 out of 5 classes, pretty much the strongest build in each of those has been nerfed. And then there are more general nerfs across some of the neutral stats that were too good, I guess. So that has made everything feel a bit harder, and enemies hitting a bit harder. In terms of, we're doing less damage, enemies are doing more damage seemingly, so that's not great. Blizzard specifically said they didn't want people maybe pushing as high into Nightmare Dungeons as they have been, with hyper-specific builds, some of which they say were actively bugged. So the builds that got hit the hardest, the Barbarian Hammer of the Ancient build, which you can see me using here post-patch, in a 49 Nightmare Dungeon, which is not the highest I've done, but is starting to be a little trickier than it was before, certainly. Necromancers had Bone Spear nerfed, but they did get a lot of minion buffs. And then Druid got their crazy billion damage Storm Claw build nerfed. And then Sorcerers got Ice Shard nerfed very heavily. The main thing is how bad things are for Sorcerers. Sorcerer has always been the weakest class since the game launched. That was the exception of one build specifically, the Ice Shard build, which could really, hammer things down, whether it be mobs or whether it be bosses. A lot of stuff has been changed with Ice Shards, be it class stuff, or be it, I think there was at least a couple of, quote, bug fixes in there where it was doing too much damage or stacking too much. But the problem is nothing appears to have been buffed to the level it needs to be to create some sort of other viable class or element for Sorcerers. This also comes with the reduction, a reduction in damage reduction for Sorcerers, which are already the squishiest class. And then their new aspect is something about buffing resistances, and then this is in an era where they have specifically said resistances are not working ahead of season 2 here, so they're not even going to work for an entire season. The overall nerfs were to things like vulnerable, critical hit damage, and cooldown reduction. The vulnerable one was kind of easy to see because every build leaned pretty hard into vulnerable damage to some extent, although Sorcerers, again, more than many. And the cooldown thing is annoying because, yes, it was kind of mandatory to stack cooldown reduction, but that, really set up a lot of kind of build timing in terms of when you use your skills and stuff, and if that gets nerfed, then kind of it can screw up your timing for a lot of builds. Like my shout timing on this Barbarian build is not what it once was because of that. In terms of my own personal builds here, this Hammer of the Ancients build has definitely been nerfed. It's still good. As you can see, I'm still doing okay, although this is not the highest of Nightmare Dungeons. My damage has been nerfed, definitely. There was some sort of, quote, bug where along the outside of the Hammer of the Ancient explosions it did more damage than it was supposed to. And I used to be getting 6, 7, 8 million crits on this. Now I don't usually get above 2 to 3 million. I've seen a 5 million, I think, on an overpower hit, but that damage has been significantly nerfed. It can spike to be enough to still one-shot some things at this level, but as you can see, getting through elites is definitely a little bit of a struggle, at least compared to what it used to be. At this level, I was still one-shotting most elites in the old way, and now that is not happening. Survivability is a lot lower. I have all this stuff about, I have fortification, I have pretty high health, I have pretty high armor, I have damage reduction fortification. Like, I have a lot. I have close range damage. I have a lot of damage reduction on this. And yet, at level 49, like, a couple B shots, or in a different dungeon, those giant goat guys who, like, slam their giant axe on you. Like, this is taking me down to almost dead. And I am spamming health potions at a level I've never had to before. And maybe this is what they want. They want, like, a little more danger, but they've nerfed a lot of survivability stuff, especially the armor aspect, which, you know, scaled up to give you a bunch of extra armor. I think they cut that in half. And all of that is really noticeable. All of that is noticeable across a lot of classes. My other main class is Rogue, which I'm not playing here, but I had a Twisting Blades build for Rogue because that was better than most range build. Rogue is like the one class that kind of escaped anything major here. I wrote up the list of nerfs and buffs. I think Rogue had one nerf, and effectively nothing about it, about ranged or melee builds, were nerfed with Rogue, outside of the general nerfs to things like vulnerable and critical hit and cooldown and stuff. So that build has felt pretty close to the same. Like, that really hasn't changed very much. Again, survivability might be a little worse. Cooldowns are kind of screwed up, but it's not like there was, you know, they hit Twisting Blades super hard or something. So they did leave that alone. What I'm kind of wondering about, is the patch as bad as we think it is? There are a few things here where in 12 hours, I do not think that is nearly enough time to test out all the uniques, all the new aspects, every buff. There are dozens of buffs across each class, and some of them are minor, others seem more major. Like, no one has been able to fully build out new builds using these buffs. And, you know, you can do it on paper, but like to fully utilize these builds, you're going to have to refarm a bunch of gear that leans into these builds. You're going to have to figure out a new optimal skill setup, Paragon board, all of this stuff. Almost no one has done this quickly. Like, yes, some of the hardest core Diablo content creators, I'm sure, are scrambling to come out with new post 1.1 patch super builds, and like, that's the point. I think there will be those builds still, and those will exist, but I think it's a little soon to judge just based on patch notes alone and the fact that the biggest builds have been nerfed. Outside of Sorcerer, where I understand why Sorcerers are very mad. In terms of other stuff, Hell Tides, like increasing the mystery chest to 250. As I've said before, the whole gear system is screwed up right now because Ancestral Rares are like the end-all be-all of like what you want to look for. As you can see in here, I'm not even bothering with Ancestral Rares because like this build is probably as close as good as I'm going to get it, and frankly, I just don't want to sift through a bunch of rares. I'm just trying to get to level 100 and get all the Paragon points at this point. So like, I don't really even know if it matters that much if things aren't dropping, or if it costs a little more to get more ancestral drops, and like, you know, half the time they're sacreds. It's just a little more annoying, and I guess they didn't want people getting like 4 mystery chests in one run. There is a bug right now where cinders are just barely dropping. I think it's like 30% of what they used to be. That was not listed in the patch notes, and Blizzard has confirmed that that is a bug and that will be hotfixed. But until that is hotfixed, Hell Tides are useless. There's no point farming Hell Tides until that is useless, which is one of like 2 viable endgame activities, but everything still kind of pales in comparison to Nightmare Dungeons. There are some good things I think definitely came with this patch. The Nightmare Dungeon rotation, I am certainly grateful for. I am very much glad that we have at least a bunch of new Nightmare Dungeons to do. Even if the objectives are same, it's still better than not having a rotation. Like, I enjoy the fact that at least it's a little different now. I was disappointed to see that they didn't really focus on any of the truly garbage affixes that can roll on Nightmare Dungeons, ones that make me like just auto-delete them. They did not change any of those, it seems. They barely buffed any uniques when there's so many underperforming uniques. They introduced another freaking uber unique. Like, what is the point? What is the point of doing that? That's like a whole ass unique item that people could be farming for, that is, you add it to the game and it's essentially like adding air. It means nothing. All of this is also a little bit moot because the season launches tomorrow. And Blizzard is absolutely assuming that most of the player base that is still playing the game right now is probably going to switch to seasonal content. Especially because you don't have to pay for it. Like, you don't have to pay to start a seasonal character or run the new things and Corrupted Hearts and all that stuff. And I do believe a lot of these changes are probably for the benefits of the season, the new leveling process, stuff like that, stuff we can't quite experience yet until we get going. And I think a lot of people are going to be running through the season with a new class, with new builds they've never done before, and there will be significantly less eternal play for most characters. Then again, I know the desire that a character you've invested 50, 100, 150 hours to already, you still want to build up that character to be powerful, you want to max them, so like I get that people are annoyed that some of their builds that they worked for dozens of hours on are now a lot less strong than they used to be, and that is frustrating. But I do think we need more time to understand the full scope of these changes. Well, immediately, if you had the strongest build in the game, it is less strong now, and that feels bad. I think more exploration needs to happen with the dozens and dozens and dozens of listed buffs in this, and what, if anything, is more viable. Maybe nothing is. Maybe the buffs weren't enough, and maybe nothing changed, but I do think we need a little more time on that. I think we need to see how the season feels when we launch that tomorrow. But I get why people are upset right now, and like it's mildly annoying for my own build to just suddenly be weaker, but this is going to take a little more time to like fully suss out what happened here. There's going to be an emergency campfire chat on Friday with the Blizzard team because of how mad everyone is about the patch, and boy, am I interested to see how that goes. So we'll see, but I'll probably do something after that campfire to see what they say. But anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later. Take care.